Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Design Review Board meeting for tonight. This is a regular Design Review Board meeting. Sorry, I'll get that out of the way. Of the City of Milton. I'm Ken Warlick. This is a 7-member board appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations. The Design Review Board reviews plans and makes recommendations to the Community Development Director for the developments except single family in the form-based code and overlay districts. In addition, the Design Review Board approves or denies demolition requests and makes recommendations to the Board of Zoning Appeal on variances. So at this time, I would like to ask everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. All right, moving on. I would like to introduce our staff and board members.
Michael Carterman, Senior Planner.
Rima Abdel Fattah.
Samia Coker, Cheltenham Walk.
Celeste Jackson, Saddle Springs Drive.
Ken Warlick, Hipworth Road.
Danielle Gagne, Morning Mountain Way.
David Jackson, Bethany Way.
And Danella, Haybridge Lane.
All right, great. Moving on to item number 3, approval and amendment of tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
All right, so we have a motion for Ms. Gagne, a second for Ms. Jackson. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving on. Approval of the meeting minutes from the Design Review Board of October 1st, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve October 1st meeting minutes.
Second.
All right, a motion for Mr. Jackson, a second from Ms. Coker. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right. All right, moving on. Tonight, demolition of structures. We have none. So we will move on to the next, which is courtesy reviews. So we have 6A, V24-17, 13210 Owens Way.
Evening, board members.
Good evening, Michael. Great to have you.
Variance courtesy review, and the applicant is Kelly Cravens. The address is 13210 Owens Way, and they're requesting the following variance: to reduce a 25-foot minimum side yard to 16.5 feet adjacent to the north property line for an existing pool cabana accessory structure. Here is the aerial of the map, and this is located in the 6 Hills subdivision. Here is the primary. Can you see the screen?
It's flashing.
Counting all those votes.
There we go.
Here is the primary single-family home, the pool, and directly to the north is the pool cabana, right here. The zoning is AG1 and is located in the rural Milton overlay district. The size of the lot is 1.65 acres. The length is 464 feet, width 180 feet. The front on Owens Way is 60 feet, and on Owens Lake Road is a 40-foot side corner. Here's a zoomed in shot showing the cabana 16.5 feet away from the side property line. And the surveyor actually showed areas that have landscaping, and you'll see that more in the photos that follow the presentation. You can see it on both side property lines are pretty heavily screened with trees. Some background information: the applicant purchased the property in March 2022. The previous homeowner, not the current variance applicant, constructed the cabana without first receiving a community development approved building permit. Letter provided from the 6 Hills HOA details previous property owner received approval from the 6 Hills HOA Review Committee in 2021. The cabana was believed to have been constructed in early 2022 prior to the variance applicant purchasing the property in March of 2022. So if I had to suspect, January or February talking to the variance applicant. Here's a view east. This is across Owens Lake Road. View to the west, shot from the edge of the pool, looking in the backyard. You can see it slopes down pretty aggressively and is heavily wooded. View to the north, and you can make out the cabana just a little bit on the side, showing the existing screening. And the other side of the property, view to the west, the other side property line, also pretty heavily screened. Here are some photos of the existing cabana. And this is the rear of the cabana facing the side property line, and you can see the screening. And this is a shot provided from the applicant showing an aerial from, I assume, a kitchen window, showing just an aerial of the screening overall. And I took a photo from Owens Way, the side yard, showing where the cabana is, and it's very well hidden from the street, and you can barely just see the top of it. They have two support letters, 13220 Owens Way, which is the bordering property owner closest to the variance request, and the Six Hills Homeowner Association. Here's the email/support email from the HOA. And support from the border neighbor to the north. Any questions for staff?
So you can't even really see this thing. So what brought up that? Is it just to bring it into compliance, or was there a?
They are selling their home, or they're
Got
in
it,
the
okay.
process of.
Got
a new
it.
buyer.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Any more questions for staff? No? Okay. Thank you. So at this time, if the applicant wants to come up, if you have anything to add?
I don't know that we have anything specific to add, other than it did come up as we were selling the house, we were under contract. And,
Yeah, microphone, yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to put you on the spot. Just
no worries. We were under contract and the purchaser decided that it looked weird after they were out of due diligence. And upon learning that with their tape measure, they measured it to be less than the 25-foot setback, they came down and I know they said they didn't tell on us, but they did. So, but we had no idea until we were contacted then subsequent to them coming down here. So needless to say, we were a little bit surprised by it all.
I imagine. Okay. Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? No? Okay. I'm going to ask, just because we have to, public comment?
None?
Okay, I'll close public comment. Any discussion with the board? No? Yeah, sorry. You can't even see that thing. Unfortunately, it is the process though, but hopefully the BZA will kind of see it y'all's way. So I guess at this point, seeing no further discussion, I'd like to open it up for a recommendation.
I'll make a recommendation to approve agenda item 6A, 13210 Owens Way, recommending approval to the Board of Zoning Appeals for the variance.
Okay.
I second.
All right, so we have a motion for a recommendation for approval to the BZA from Ms. Danella and a second from Ms. Coker. All those in favor? Aye. Good luck. Thank you. All right, moving on. We have no final reviews tonight. And we'll go to 8A, new business, the Deerfield Implementation Plan Update. Allison, how are you?
Great. How are you all doing?
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Hey, good. You're welcome to stay if you want to, though. We've got some really good stuff. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Sounds great. Full status.
Contingent variance. Sushi.
Right there.
Yep.
There we go.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I'm going full screen.
Oh, this is different than.
Yeah.
than Microsoft.
Well, thank you. It's been, I guess, 2 months since we were here. I know some of you were able to attend the public meeting that we had in September. So what we wanted to do was share some of that and then sort of where we're going in preparation for, we'll be able to bring the plan, the concept, and the design guidelines to you in a future meeting, but we wanted to help reflect on what we've heard. So, I shared with you the last time I was here the guiding principles, and what we did was we really tried to understand what the what the priorities were, and it's a little bit hard to see on my screen, so hopefully you can see a little bit better on your screen. But what we heard out of the guiding principles that we've shared previously, that a lot of folks really found importance in connectivity, safe places to walk, and that landscape really evokes the sense of place and beauty and shade. We asked the question again that we had in a previous meeting, which are what are 3 new things you'd love to see or do in Deerfield? And overwhelmingly, infrastructure and transportation and that sort of category encapsulated the comments that we got. Really want better infrastructure and better mobility options. So essentially not having to get into your car to get around Deerfield. In terms of land use and redevelopment, about 30% of the comments were really wanted to have thoughtfully integrated new housing and commercial spaces, and an emphasis on maintaining a balance between new development and preserving Milton's unique identity, and sensitivity about that balance, but wanting to also see mixed use developments with residential above retail. And then a lot of comments around green spaces and parks. So creating trails. And again, that also connects back up to that earlier category of infrastructure and transportation. Open space that accommodates community events like small concerts and plays. And there'll be more details on this in a minute. But what is your favorite thing you like about Deerfield today? The trees, landscaping, and shade, particularly along Deerfield Parkway. And Bob and I were talking in a meeting earlier this week how right now Deerfield Parkway seems to evoke what people have as a sense of identity for the whole Deerfield study area. And it's because the tree-lined medians, the mature trees along the sidewalks are shaded. It's a comfortable place to walk. People, while you can drive fast, it feels a little bit slower. It's not as much traffic. And then shopping and retail. And we've talked about this before. The convenience to places like Target and Kohl are really important. And there's a clear desire for more dining options, but they don't want to eliminate the convenience retail that is already there. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a cold, so I apologize. So at the mobility table, we heard a lot about improving connectivity. And what you see here on the graphic is we had people put strings on the map that to look at where they wanted to move around and walk or bike around in Deerfield, not having to be super focused on the roads, right? Like, okay, if you could get from point A to point B, where do you want to go? And so you can see there's a lot of wanting to move in ways that don't necessarily depend on the existing roadways. And what does that tell you? We had a lot of comments about, can we have something like the Alpha Loop? Can we have recreation-focused trails? Can we make circulation on the street a lot easier? And so that has, again, a recurring theme over and over again. Highway 9 traffic speeds are a major concern for neighborhoods. The design of key intersections are an issue of concern for the city and the community. And since walking is a major desired form of connectivity, an increased focus on pedestrian safety is going to be important. Now, architectural look and feel. And I think I may have said this before in my previous meeting, but we've gotten a lot of consensus from you all and from the community on what people really like to see. It's been encouraging because it makes it a lot easier when we go to do the design guidelines. So when I say retail favorability, these images, these are the top 3 vote getters when it comes to retail. And you can see that 82% of the comments were favorable for the image on the left, 78 for the other 2. So that's extraordinarily high. We just have the top 3 here, but we had some definite no's, but really I think it was very consistent again with what we heard here at the design review board, at the planning board, and from other participants along the way. Again, this looks familiar. So a 70% favorability in this mixed use building on the left, 68 in the middle, and 57% on the right. So again, I think what we see consistently is that variation in facade type, mix of colors and textures, and a sense that there is a really strong pedestrian experience at the base of the building. So it's a comfortable place to be. It feels scaled towards humans. Open space and parks. So we offered a lot because we had done some architectural imagery before, and we had gotten some feedback on that. We spent a lot of time and had a lot more open space imagery at the September 9th meeting. In the September meeting. And I think what you're going to see is consistently, trees and landscape, but also just places to linger and be. So here you can see on the left that very natural looking park, but it's got some structure to it, right? You've got sidewalks, you've got benches, you can do things in the green space. So it's not a totally natural park, but it is a place of refuge. And so what we heard in the comments related to these images is that they really want to have natural and relaxing spaces. They want to have green spaces with trees, nature preserves, and rural views. There aren't a lot of rural views in Milton, but where we can create them, I think landscape is a powerful tool to evoke that unique sense that Milton has that differentiates it from Alpharetta and Forsyth County and Johns Creek. Preferences are definitely for places to relax. Those were the comments that we heard a lot about. Interactive and civic spaces. So the community really expressed a desire for parks that have amenities like playgrounds, walking trails, fountains, areas for socializing, and civic events. And preservation of Milton character. And these comments focused on maintaining large trees and the natural landscape. So the other element of open space that we really wanted to get a sense of, because we know that people want a retail environment and dining options, is what do you envision for plazas? So you can see the image on the far left really got a lot of positive votes. 91% is really, really large. The one in the middle with 76%. And I think here, and we focused on the conversation, this is not about the buildings, this is about the plaza space, right? And 72% for the image on the right. So what you see here is different elements of lighting, different opportunities for seating, and it's a mix of hard with a little bit of soft. Enough soft so it's not totally hardscaped, but here it's mostly hard. They're mostly hardscape plazas, but still a natural aesthetic to have native trees, plants, and shade, and they don't want it to become too urbanized. So while, again, I go back to they like this image in the middle, but we want to make sure that the massing around it isn't doesn't feel too urban. And when we talk about hubs, we're really talking about places where the community is drawn to. And so on the far left and in the middle, you see that Swanee Town Center and other town centers with retail, large gathering spaces really scored well, along with the location on the right. Again, it's retail environments that have large community gathering spaces and opportunities for things like community concerts, real active programming. So managed open space. But again, trees and shade are very important. And there were a lot of people mentioned Avalon and the attributes of downtown Alpharetta as having activation, but not having buildings that felt too big. And we've talked a lot about that central space in Avalon where you feel like you're in a retail environment, but really you're in a predominantly residential environment when you look at aggregately. But it's programmed like an active retail space. So when we think about spaces that are places that develop culture, we had a lot of favorability for this image on the left that evokes, that's got the fire pit, you've got food trucks, you've got, again, it goes back to some of those earlier comments about the opportunity to be relaxed. And again, I think the image in the middle, same thing. It is about that opportunity to enjoy food and beverage and dining options with an indoor-outdoor feel. And then, of course, the opportunity for community gathering space. And people like the opportunity to have some adult games, and even hanging out in this cool, interesting hammock element in a park. But what that tells us, again, I think what we're seeing overall is that sense of, there's a sense of formality, but at the end of the day, it is about a place where people want to come and be able to unwind in an environment that is more active than what's currently there. And they want to do it in spaces that evoke a sense of celebration, a sense of comfort, and a place that's comfortable to be with your kids. Any age really feels like it's an exciting and fun place to be. String lights, fountains. We had a lot of comments about fountains. We had a lot of comments about fire pits. And I'll be honest, the image on the left, I wasn't sure how people would respond, but it was one of the top 3 vote getters. And you can see it's a little bit an element of sort of public art, installation, place where people can sit, sort of a little bit different vibe, right, than something on the far.
Cheap Costco lights, hanging lights.
Yeah.
It's amazing. The least expensive one is the most favorable.
Yeah. So the key words for all of this is really, they wanted to have gathering spots that had a natural look and feel, family-friendly spaces. Comments really discussed places to play, have picnics, and enjoy the outdoors. But then there's also an element of wanting to have programs and events, so live music, farmers markets, casual community gatherings, in a place that is flexible to allow for community interaction. So I think if you really look at something, I will go back just to think about flexibility. If you look at these hubs, you can see that they can be programmed, they can be unprogrammed, and they're still, you get a sense that it is the community space. And this could even be located within a private development, but because it's community space, and sometimes it's programmed and sometimes it's not. Like Avalon feels like the community space, even though it is a private space. And then retail experience. So the community wants restaurants that are integrated into the outdoor experience, including coffee shops, cozy cafes, and bakeries. There was a clear desire for a connection of these elements to parks and open spaces. We had references to places like Avalon, Greenville, downtown Greenville, South Carolina, and Swanee. So we asked sort of overall the the landscape palette. And so you can see sort of the rural imagery. These are the top three vote getters. And what I want you to pay attention to as we scroll through here is actually the percentage of positive comments, because it does shift when we go, and the modern farmhouse gets really strong favorability. And what is interesting is how you would meld the two, a modern farmhouse and rural, but you can see the way that there's some elements where they could be blended together. But then you move to contemporary and there were very few not very few, there were much fewer positive comments. Not unexpected, but helpful nonetheless. And the keywords were really, again, trees, shade, less interested in the contemporary feel, but some contemporary elements included in that rural and modern farmhouse aesthetic. And you can see that a little bit in this image on the far left. That's a bit of a contemporary shade element that you could see integrated into a more rural or modern farmhouse aesthetic. The significant focus was placed on spaces that provide seating, protected paths, and opening and welcoming for community gatherings, and preference for not just landscaping, but features like fountains and lights were noted as being welcoming and charming. So far, the feedback from the community includes the desire for more opportunities to enjoy food and beverage and entertainment in Deerfield in a more walkable environment than exists today. Any questions so far? Thoughts?
I mean, obviously it's, have this beautiful picture of what the people want, but the balance between what the people want,
Mm-hmm.
what the developers are willing and able and
Yeah.
wanting to do. I know that's been a big part, and we've talked about a lot of this stuff in the implementation meetings. I mean, do you think that we'll be able to pull off that balance between the two?
I do. I think that part of it is also how you're able to focus what the city invests in to set the stage to inspire the market to respond to that.
Got it.
I think that it's going to be very important for Milton to create elements of the public realm where where you as the city have the agency to do so, that sets the stage for how you want the developers to respond in kind. Doesn't mean that you have to do a 40-acre Swanee Town Center day one built by the city. But what it does mean, I think, is, and in particular, and something we've talked about, is I think there's an opportunity to build the first stage of that loop trail. And that could be very powerful and would inspire the developers to respond. And I think as the market notices that, then they in kind want to build something that responds to the city investment and takes advantage of that and creates more of that on their own property.
Yeah, it's kind of like the satellite store, right? They bring it in.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming that's the reason why the city is heavily involved in purchasing the park property over there. And then, okay.
Which park property?
Don't they have, didn't they? purchase
Yeah.
property?
Yeah, they just acquired another like 3.5 acres, abutting the other property that they bought
But there's another one over there too, right? That's
Yeah,
how
Webb
many
Road,
acres?
on Webb Road.
on Webb Road too.
Yeah.
We have open space
Yeah.
on Webb Road too.
Okay.
Mhm. Yes, and so what we have talked about is that there's a great opportunity that from that Webb Road property through to the other park property and then over to the lake behind Verizon really offers an opportunity of, say, a phase 1 Deerfield loop. I don't know that that's the right name for the trail yet. I think that's something that needs to be thought through, but that there's opportunity to connect two spaces that you control, and then a third space that I think you have a willing something that's already been identified in a previous master plan as a good open space. And the southern portion of Deerfield is really your opportunity for big public space amenities, both in the public sector side and the private sector side. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. And I think, you know, and I think the reality and something that we've talked about is that the landscape is really as much of the character building element of Deerfield as the actual buildings. And in fact, to the community, the community really has evoked a sense in their comments that may be the most important element. And I know to Bob it is as well. And so one of the things that, because you have such a large study area, we've thought about open space in a couple of different ways. So you can think about it in pocket or neighborhood parks. So that's about it can be a quarter of an acre to 15 acres. That's accessed primarily by foot from about a quarter-mile radius or a 10-minute walk. And it serves the immediate community, passive or active. You also have linear parks, and those are connected to natural features or a circulation route. And 2 or more linear parks connected can become a greenway and can provide alternate transportation route. And we've already heard about that a lot from the community. You know, I think that if you think about a trail loop, it could be at some points in a linear park, at some points it's just a trail through maybe just off street. And then in other areas, it's through a totally natural and through a neighborhood. Community and regional parks are really 15 to hundreds of acres accessed by automobile with a greater variety of amenities, including regional attractions, passive or active. And then specialty parks may be privately or publicly operated, can be revenue generating, generally do not rely on natural features. And so that's like an aquatic park, a sports park, or a skate park. And again, I think that notion of not relying on natural features as part of its design as an element that makes a specialty park different than other parks that we are describing. And then pop-up. It could be permanent or temporary, typically less than an acre. They're low cost, they're low maintenance, flexible, and demonstrative of amenities and programs. And I actually think that pop-up parks are going to be an important element of the implementation as you start to think about some of these properties that are not going to develop right away, but you want to have some public space as an element to, in some ways, create a differentiator in the market. For example, there was a pop-up park built in my former neighborhood, and the neighborhood was so hungry for its own neighborhood space. And I think probably there are a lot of people in Deerfield who would feel this way, that they don't have their community space. They do have some parks, but they don't feel like a community space in the way that we're thinking. And all of a sudden, the neighborhood started thinking of this location as a place to go. And it was just for the park. So that when the developer came in and actually built the buildings, it was much easier to attract retailers because there was already a natural flow of people in and out, both by foot and by bike and by car, to get to this pop-up park space. And in fact, it became hard to get rid of the pop-up park space because it was so beloved, but they did, and they made something better. But I think that that's just a kind of anecdotal of how these open spaces, I think, are going to be key in changing how the market sees Deerfield.
I thought you were going to tell us that your neighborhood got together and purchased the.
No.
Well, that's where we're going.
No, no. It's not my current neighborhood, but my old neighborhood. Yeah, we couldn't have afforded that. It was like, built.
So were the parks developed by the city, or were they developed by the developers?
Both. Combination. Yeah. So I think that that's where we're gonna, there are opportunities for all of these, and it's participation by the public and the private sector. And I think if you can think about too, as we think about what seems to be a really organizing element is this notion of a loop or a trail throughout Deerfield. If you think about how, I think of it more the way, you say the alpha loop or even the Beltline is developing in pieces. But if you think of even those segments, particularly of the Beltline, they have transformed the real estate market from something that would have never worked. It just would never have come to fruition in the way that it has without that Beltline element being there. And it's not even long sections of the Beltline. Now we're going to see that to a lesser scale in Milton just because of population, but they had really, so making an investment in a strong segment of that loop really begins to set the stage. And then you get participation from the private development to bring part of that trail through their property because they see the value to the retail. And the good thing is that
They
we
wanna
have,
connect people too.
yeah, and you have local examples and local markets that and developers who see it already happening in the Atlanta region, which is a real advantage to say other regions because the retailers, even national or mid-size retailers, can understand the power of a trail to transform the market. And we talked about the plazas, and I showed you the images of those, but the descriptions, I would just say civic space, which is the traditional form. It's open and available to all, and it caters to a wide variety of functions. Public is a managed open space available and open to all, even if temporarily controlled. Then you have privately owned public spaces. They're privately owned and maintained, but functionally and user-determined spaces and have controlled access.
It's pretty much like the green right here.
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah. Third space is sort of a semi-public meeting space in social spaces, and they could be public, they can be private. And again, another pop-up plaza. And it's a temporary reallocation of open space to provide specific functionality, low cost, low maintenance. And sometimes it's a test case, often referred to as tactical urbanism. And again, I think that when you think about the large parcels that you have in Deerfield, the pop-up parks and the pop-up plazas really begin to become powerful tools. An example of some pop-up plazas that I know of, it can be barely the size of a parking space, but it's something that somebody plans to have yoga in. So they put down some turf and they have yoga classes, and that is it. And put up some Costco lights. I mean, they really can be low cost and low maintenance, and they transform people's perception of where it's comfortable to be and stay. And we talked about hubs. And so hubs are large scale connective open spaces that create community identity and serve as an extension of the community. And I would just say that I think because of the location of Deerfield relative to where we are right now, there is a real desire to have a hub in Deerfield that defines their community identity within Milton. So I think it's very important, and they can be organically created, or they can be master planned and privately developed. And they usually are a mix of green and hardscape. And what we saw in the images, that preference for more green than hard, but I think that some of it really has to do with how you want to program the space. So our philosophy as we're developing the design guidelines are that we're really bring rural Milton into urban Milton, and we establish a theme that gives all of these types of spaces order and hierarchy, and makes it easy to brand as Destination Deerfield, and how that branding so that you are uniquely Deerfield and you're uniquely Milton within the same. So what does that mean? So it's a structured system of open spaces that are going to be codified in the design guidelines. Open space will be integrated with circulation. In other words, when you look at the mobility plan and the open space plan, they are really knit together, and you can't really pull them apart as separated, because I think what we hear is that to the people of Deerfield, and I would just say that the majority of the feedback that we got in the public meetings were from Deerfield residents. We certainly had some folks from outside of Deerfield, but it was majority people Deerfield, is that they want to be able to get around Deerfield in an open space environment, in the parks and trail system. And that we have both passive and active spaces. So it is a real mix of pocket and neighborhood parks, linear, community, regional, specialty, and pop-up. All those parks I described. And it's a large study area, and you have the perfect properties to do all of those types of parks, along with private and publicly managed plazas. And I think those plazas should be associated with retail, mixed use, civic, and other urban typologies. And I think urban, that doesn't mean tall, that just means mix of uses. And that's civic space, privately owned spaces, third spaces, and pop-ups. And then hubs, the highly active destinations. Any questions so far? And I think overall, as we've said again and again, connectivity is really key. Design a multi-tier of public and privately funded Deerfield Loop. Is there equestrian riding terminology that could be applied for the branding of this loop? That's a question we've asked. Allows residents the ability to access parks, activity hubs via alternative modes of transportation, and creates an organizing identity to Deerfield.
Call it just Deerfield Trail.
Yeah.
Deer Trail is a deer trail.
A
is what
deer
they
trail?
like. Yeah, I mean,
There you go. I think you're writing now. Good. And it's generally
that's copyrighted.
Yeah. So I think that we're thinking of, if you think of Deerfield, we have the loop that has a passive, the western side of Highway 9 is a little less active. It's the more passive side of the loop. So you're there by the schools, and you have some properties that already you'll connect from Webb Road, the property on Webb Road, sorry. And then up to the north, when you get to the north, you transition and cross Highway 9. And then that's a pretty densely organized property through there with single family neighborhoods, some townhomes. There's not as much opportunity for passive trail, but there's equal opportunity for trail that is off-road, partly on-road, that you really can circulate the entire loop. And then utilizing across the south side, again, as I said, what the Lake on Verizon property over to that Webb Road property really makes a nice connection. And then the spine central to that loop would be Highway 9, where there are their own project plans. And there's already thoughts of additional mobility and paths along Highway 9, but the loop is not dependent on Highway 9 being a comfortable place for everybody to get people from north to south. And I think that's going to be really important, is that some people are going to feel very comfortable walking when Highway 9 is completed. They're going to feel comfortable walking along Highway 9. Others are not. And so you want to provide opportunities to be able to get north and south without having to go on alongside Highway 9. But the other opportunity is that we know that there's already a main loop of the city master plans, the main loop of the trail system, and leverages the design guidelines to regulate private developers to incorporate spur loops that access open space improvements within their properties, adding those into the public realm. And then you also apply this trail to the existing transects within the form-based code. I think that's something that works very easily. The other thing is that not only having spur loops within private developments, but also spur loops that connect you to the to the different trails that Alpharetta and other communities have, and potentially more in the future. So, so here we are, the design guidelines. So, the city currently has a blanket 10% open space requirement in the code. We need to define a set of regulations that set the environment to provide intentional open space that is resilient to changing retail conditions and allows private developers some flexibility to provide creative solutions that are site appropriate and define unique places. Does that mean we change the blanket 10% open space requirement? I think that's something we're looking at, because I think it's not so much about quantity as it is quality, is what we have heard.
Is that 10% concurrent? That all just, you have to have one large green space, or could it be like 3% here, 3%
There are
here?
options in the code on different ones, but they do have minimum sizes and,
Okay.
and frontages on streets.
Got it.
What we're looking at is breaking away from just a percentage and really putting in the design guidelines various options for these types of open spaces. Like if you create a plaza, why wouldn't that be counted as a nice open space in your requirement, right? Especially if you start putting amenities like fire pits and things like that. So we're looking at it more holistically rather than just a percentage. We're trying to say, create something great.
Right.
And maybe it's at 6%, but it's so great that it should count for the requirement.
And privately maintained, but public occupied, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Public access, privately maintained.
Yeah. And so that means we'll offer an illustrated set of approved designs, materials, spatial parameters for developers to employ in their projects that support the city's overall goals. And I think, again, giving that menu of plaza, different types of parks, is it a neighborhood park? Is it a pocket park? Do you have a pop-up park? Giving a menu of items that builds to, on whether it's a large or small property, a network of open space throughout the entire study area. And the goal is to create a unified Deerfield design aesthetic while allowing individual projects within the district to develop organically and authentically with unique offerings, amenities, and elements. And I think here, Gray, our landscape architect, talked about this last Thursday, is that we heard a lot of comments about Avalon in the public engagement. People like Avalon, they go to Avalon and they go to downtown Alpharetta. Well, and a lot of people who live in Milton. What Deerfield offers is a little bit of a blank canvas to have an authentic experience to Milton that perhaps is missing from particularly Avalon, that is less authentic to Alpharetta. It's a retail-driven aesthetic. How do you create a Milton-driven authenticity to these developments? So that's and that design aesthetic, I think, can really be implemented with the landscape. Open space regulations will be prescriptive based on size of lot, land use, and master plan amenities. We will outline desired amenities and qualify them as district amenities. So district level amenities are things like amphitheaters, a large interactive water feature, an ice rink, things that would attract, you only need one in the study area. But then the property amenities are things that multiple properties in the study area may have, like fire pits, public art, small scale water features, things like that. We also want to think about that roads converted to dual use may be given credit as open space. So thinking about roads, particularly on the private development, differently than we do today. And that means that they are closed off often the way that maybe they're not paved, maybe they have pavers, and maybe there's no curbs with the park that's adjacent to the roadway. So there are ways to think about roads differently. Specialty small structures are given as credit for open space. So that's what a retail kiosk, if you think about the cool buildings in the middle of the open space in Avalon, it's a retail space. So it's technically not park, but it feels like it's a park building.
It'll be like a food truck also, something like that.
You could do, yeah. So one thing that we have been seeing a lot of is sort of these flexible spaces or portions of parks and open spaces that are paved and have power and have all the hookups that food trucks need to operate with, they don't have to bring their generator. They can just plug in. But then other times it's just plaza space with seating. We're seeing that a lot more and more. In fact, I've been working with another city who has a private property owner who has an outdated car wash. He gets far more revenue by now being a permanent food truck park. So the car wash is still accessible and open, but 90% of the day, it is people coming to the 6 food trucks that have he permanently rents out to the, so it's changed, so I think things like food trucks and that type of activation can be thought about as open space a little more creatively. And I think, again, encourage natural plantings over structured and architectural plantings to reinforce the Milton aesthetic. I think you can kind of go back to those images of Serenbe, of the trellises with plantings on them. That feels and seems to be what the community is gravitating towards.
So just quick, we're being sensitive to different size lots. So even a Fry's, which is like 17 acres, would be differently treated than a Verizon. So do you want to touch just a little bit on like the nodes and what we're thinking, the hierarchies, even with housing, architecture? We're looking at everything, and you want to just describe that hierarchy? Because I think that's going to be really important, because it's going to apply really to everything.
Yeah, so I think that, and you can think of that north portion of Deerfield is going to feel really different than the southern portion. So if you think about where Cross Creek is and the properties immediately adjacent to Highway 9, there's some retail there, there's some commercial, but it feels local and neighborhood serving in some way. It's not going to attract regional. I don't think you want to put a regional retailer on the north end of the study area. So we're thinking about how you transition, you kind of get to Bethany Road, and that section of Bethany Road sort of in the center where you have the Publix, but you also have the public safety complex. You have the back entrance to the school. That feels maybe civic is a good way to think about it. Sort of a node that you have some smaller retail needs. You've got a drugstore, you've got drugstores, you've got some restaurants, you've got your Pike Nursery. Those are the things you want to kind of get in and out of quickly, or you want to, maybe you want to walk somewhere else, but maybe you just want to run by the grocery store. And then as you move south is when you really start to think about a little bit more intensity in terms of the activity level. I don't want to say density. I think activity level is how you want to think about it. But I think that it's still a large study area. And I think that we want to think about where do we concentrate the activity? And so we're really thinking about how can we, one of the prime pieces is to the south, having a node on the southern portion, very southern portion of the study area. For instance, the Verizon site that provides an opportunity to concentrate activity level. You've got access to, it's right across from your public park that you're doing. There's a lot of great access to that site, but it's also accessible to the north and to people outside of Milton. And then the other real node is along Highway 9 and Webb Road at the Orkin site, or in that portion of Highway 9 seems to be a, kind of two good locations to think about more activity and drawing people there. People are already drawn to the Orkin site because that's where Target and Kohl's and other retail is. That's where a lot of the convenience shopping. So there's already a natural convergence on that site. So we're really kind of thinking about how does that become higher activity, and then what does it look like to sort of tear down that activity? I'm not in density, but I think that activity, still having a lot of opportunities for green space and community gathering spaces throughout.
Do you have like a residential buffer or something like that? That kind
Uh,
We have
Right now, with the form-based code, you really don't need
Yeah.
a lot of residential buffer. The
Yeah.
whole idea is not to buffer off the communities, but to get actual linkage
Yeah.
from those residential communities to these activity nodes. So pathways, trails, and we're hoping that a lot of the developments that have natural areas now, maybe an easement or something, could utilize that as a link to join up with our trail and to get you to that activity center.
And I think that over time, I think hopefully also is you get, as the stage is set for this level of connectivity, that neighborhoods that are on the east and the west side that do have property abutting natural space want to participate and want to have that connectivity near their neighborhood. So it's not something scary, right? Like if you were to say that, I think it's something that has to sort of be implemented over time, that level of connectivity, but you provide a framework to do it early, show that it works, and show how comfortable it is and the benefit of being able to connect to these higher activity nodes, but also the lower activity nodes. I mean, I think that it's going to be important. One thing that we heard a lot about is having better walkability to schools. And I think we've talked about, you come here in the afternoon after school and all the kids are here at Crabapple. We did hear, I think the kids there want the same, when you go to school in Deerfield, you want to be able to do the same thing that the kids in this area get to do in Crabapple, which is to walk and get an afternoon coffee or smoothie or, a $6 coffee.
Yeah.
It's Milton.
Or cookie dough. Yeah.
Cookie, yeah. And I think that, again, we're not looking to transform or change the form-based code. It is really working within the existing transects, the existing land uses, but creating a clear visual guide for how you implement this, what we've heard from the community in a way that developers are excited to participate in.
Allison, do you want to just touch?
Oh, yes, thank you.
Yeah,
I
you brought it
did. One thing that we have talked about and looked at is there are probably some opportunities, and Ken, I think you've said this before, to incorporate on some of the sites smaller scaled single family residential. And by smaller scale, it's not dramatically smaller, but it is something that probably has a really high price per square foot sale price, but looks smaller than some of the other houses, the other single family homes. It's something, and it may even in some instances be smaller than in square footage slightly than a townhouse, but it is a single family detached home. Any thoughts?
I like it. It's like a Boise kind of, right?
Yeah, I know you brought it up before
Yeah.
on some of our Friday meetings, and can you maybe describe it a little bit more? Like we did it with the Wheelan property over on Webb Road, where we just had like smaller lots. They still had 3-car garages, those things. But they were smaller homes and they were tighter. Individually they look nice, but when you group them, the whole community look really kind of a nice feature to drive through. And I think it's maturing very nicely. It's aging very nicely. It's really got a nice feature to it as far as a community. So we're looking at like the apple orchard site that's up on the north end. I mean, I guess not every site, even though this is in our UGB, when we think about it, not every site can have like 100% retail on it. It's just not going to be survivable. So at some point we're saying, well, where are these activity areas? Where should we really concentrate the retail, right? To really support it, keep it vibrant, But, and then the other areas, we do want to see them get built out to some degree, and we do need some housing to support the retail is what our economic reports are coming back. So it's like, well, okay, it doesn't have to be in the same neighborhood. It could be in the northern section, right? We have a lot of these empty lots, and why not look at them? And I just wanted to get the board's feeling as far as like smaller scales, detached, single family kind of homes versus townhomes, which, I just think we have a lot of townhomes in Deerfield. So I'm trying to keep it looking a little bit more on the rural side. So I just wanted to know how do you feel about that stuff?
Those similar to the houses in like downtown Alpharetta?
Yep.
Yeah, I think,
Millionaire Road.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
it
what
provides
this,
variety, right?
yeah.
Well, when you get creative with like zero lot lines and stuff like that, you can really do some interesting things. And I think that that's where you bring the creativity of kind of private developers in there willing to do that. And then the fact that they could get a higher price per square foot for a smaller
For a
home.
smaller
But
home.
the reality is like downtown Alpharetta, you have people that just want like a 3-2, something small and quaint, but there's really not that much there. So they're buying these, 10,000 square foot homes for empty nesters, right? But if there was options for something smaller like that with a very kind of luxurious feel, I think you'd get quite a bit of an attraction to that.
But I also think that works because of location. They're paying for the location.
That's correct, yeah.
Right? Where in this area, and hopefully, but based on this presentation, it sounds like a lot of that will be further south. A lot of the activity, retail stores, restaurants.
I think
Well,
as
That's
long as
why
it's
we're-
connected.
Yes.
We're trying to
There's a
keep the
future
connectivity
connectivity.
strong. We're working with GDOT now to sort of have like I'll say a golf cart type of path, 10-foot wide path with ease to cross over and to get people from the north to those activity areas safely and comfortably. So we are trying to do that.
Okay.
Tunnels.
So
Yeah.
Tunnels
And
and bridges.
I'm just looking at
Bridges
them and
like
saying,
Peachtree
they've been there for a while and we've had some interest from retail, but then it all dissolves and people put a lot of money into trying to plan it and then they feel like, well, it's just not going to work and they kind of walk away from it. So it's almost like, initially I think the council just said, no single family, no housing. We don't want any housing on Highway 9. We just want this to be our commercial corridor. But I think if we can really start, at that time, opportunities like the Verizon site were not there. Verizon looked at us and said, nope, we're going to keep it the way it is. So now there's a different interest in that kind of site. So if those people are coming in now, those landowners, and saying, we are open, Bob, to kind of an activity center, what do you think we should do? I said, boy, that really changes the whole model here very quickly. The whole dynamic of what we're looking at, the timing of all of this is so critical because they're coming in right now, right while we're in the middle of doing this. I'm like, wow, the timing couldn't be any better. It's all market timing. And they are coming in with a lot of interest, which is changing the whole story of the dynamic of what we should do. So but I didn't know about like smaller style homes. When we did the other ones, we really thought they were going to sell for like $460. I think one sold at $460, and then the next day it went to like $650, and then $780, and then before you know it, they were like $1.2 million, $1.6 million, because the demand was so great. So, but I would like to see something in a lower price point market, not in the 1.6 market, but in the 5s and the 6s, something where we can get a little bit more affordability on some of those homes. Still not low priced, but I mean, it's still compared to like a townhouse.
So
They may start at that.
Yeah.
They'll start at that, then before you
I know,
know
I
it,
was
there'll be a
just
And then the sign will
2.8.
change after.
Yeah, there'll be
a couple
2.8,
months.
3.2.
there is certainly, it seems to be pent up demand for a smaller footprint.
So the house I first bought in Georgia is in Whittington, which is Tidwell, and where they're putting the new on and off ramp. Tidwell and I think it's Morse Road there. It's by Pulte, and they're called detached townhomes. So it was a single family home, but they were connected to our neighbor with a storage unit.
Yes, I know them very well.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, that could be another option too for property lines and taxes. And if you're buying a smaller home, you do need more storage. I mean, yeah, especially if you're retired, but I mean, they might be a little outdated now, but I'm sure with today's different facades and stuff, they could figure out a way to attach them, but with an unshared wall.
Right.
Yeah.
And then those were also 3.2s. So, I mean, those were an affordable price point.
Is that what you were thinking, Ken, when you were talking? Are we
Yeah, I
hitting
mean-
it or not?
The Aria is a good one. I mean, they just really gotten creative with all the different corridors and the different products that they have. And so similar to that, right? When you have a kind of zero lot line, then you just have a certain amount of space that you have to put a house on it. So it doesn't, you can shape it any way you want to, and you can really get creative with the layout. Whereas, you may have the front of the house is 5 feet from the next house, but the rear of the house is 20 foot. So there's no,
Yep.
it doesn't have to fit on a box, 5 foot on either side, 10 foot in the front, 10 foot in the
Yeah.
back. It's more of, and then you can be more creative in your roadway, how it shapes in, and instead of just putting in a straight road with the cul-de-sac, you can put in, if you have a back alleyway that connects to another road. So there's different ways of looking at it to where it's not all just one dimensional. And then that gives the developer creativity to create a little bit more density, right?
A common area.
But then also,
We had a large common area where we all
Mhm.
congregated in the back. We also had a corner lot that they didn't develop that we congregated on, had movie nights and stuff. Yeah, and the houses, I think there were like 4 or 5 connected, and then there was breaks in between.
Yeah.
And they kind of, they
Yeah.
weren't just straight. And
Right.
Like the neighborhood Voisey. You ever been over there, over on the other side of
Yeah, no, I know
Alpharetta?
well. So, and I think you're right. I think open space, that's what we're talking about, open space tonight. I mean, I think these open spaces become more critical in that kind of environment. So
definitely.
then we make sure we tell the developer, look, you can get this in, but you also have to give us, a little bit more open space, whether it's passive or active, for the community to utilize.
And I don't think too is having like a neighborhood that sits back from, say, like Highway 9, and having, a nice, high-end wine shop with a savvy market or something, kind of flanking that higher traffic area,
Yeah.
and then going through that into kind of a smaller,
Okay.
more boutique residential neighborhood is a bad thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's that townhome community behind like Brooklyn, Bobby G's and Aldi. Like you have to go in their entrance and kind of go back.
Mm.
Uh-huh.
It's kind of tucked in there, but you have a grocery store and bars and
Yeah.
I wouldn't leave,
Wouldn't need a car. We could sell cars.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you
true.
don't need a car.
Yeah.
And then you could just walk to,
I have a golf cart.
I like that. I like the
That's very
idea of having the smaller home, especially a lot of Milton we have aging parents and they want to come either move to Milton or they're already in Milton and they want to stay here, but they want to downsize and they
Yeah.
don't want to spend $1 million plus to downsize.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's the factor of like one day they may not need to drive. They still have their freedom because they
Yes.
have walkability. They can walk to the grocery store. They have
Yeah.
those pathways. They have their community. I feel like it would be really attractive.
Mhm.
And I'm going to talk to my mother-in-law about this soon.
I think also young professionals, it's good for them
Yes,
too.
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, it becomes you talk about the barbell, right? Like, so you don't want a barbell where you have a lot of, I think in Milton, you have a lot of the middle and the aging may have a hard time finding housing and the young may have a hard time finding housing. So if you could provide that variety, and again, it's not about providing, and I think that's where the element of not just price point, but sizing is not indicative of lower quality. It just provides another opportunity for people who don't want the large home.
What size lots and house are we thinking?
We haven't gotten into that level of detail. I think we wanted to ask the question. Honestly, you can get very high price. I'm not recommending this, but I would just, for reference, we are seeing how houses sell very quickly that are literally stacked cottages. We call them stacked cottages. They're 15 feet wide by 40 feet long and 0 lot line. And
Garages or no?
No, not garages.
So where do they park?
But they have an alley access. So their front porch is on the main road and they have an alley behind them that they park.
It's a similar product to like the Taylor Morrison over here.
And again, I'm not saying
Yeah.
that that's the answer, but to give you a reference, the market is very much, everyone having a 2-car garage and having additional parking spaces is not necessarily where there's a market for doing something different than that, which allows you to do different things with the public realm. And again, I just say that for reference, and they're selling quickly.
Well, there's a need. I mean,
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it doesn't have
deny
to be
that.
everywhere. I'm
That's
saying
right. I
maybe
think
we-
it's a
we're
variety.
trying to look for variety, a couple of spots. Maybe we could try different things so we get a nice cross-section of available housing types and sizes and price points. And, we sort of can say, yes, this is, it's a kind of an appropriate area for it.
And I think when you go to that type of house, it also supports, as you said, a different type of retail. And I think there are parts of the district, particularly some of the lots on the north side of Highway 9, they have retail and they have commercial, and it is more neighborhood serving. And that works very well from sort of a noise and a service standpoint, and sort of the traffic that they generate to have at the back of that parcel some residential, some detached residential.
So having some, linear retail along Highway 9 and housing in the back is not a bad thing.
no.
No, I don't think so.
Just, that's what I'm asking. So
Yeah, because I think that I don't think anyone's looking to kind of get a smaller, kind of higher end home in the middle of the woods, right? If they're buying in that area, they're knowing that they're buying in kind of a more of an urban area, and they're doing it and they're paying a higher price because, like you said earlier, they want to be close to that. They want to be connected to that. So then having that aspect to it just brings more customers, which helps incentivize the developers that come in. And now you say, hey, we've got these couple little pocket developments that are going to be residential. That even more gives them better ammunition to move forward with their project, knowing that they've got a little bit more, walkability, people that can just come and utilize their spaces.
So as like if Stone Creek Church wants to come in, we're encouraging them to have a mix of housing types. So it's not just all single family detached, same size, same lots. We're trying to break it up. So maybe we transition from Highway 9, some retail, linear retail, then we go back into live work kind of spaces, and then, duplexes, and then townhomes, and then single family detached. So I'm just saying it could be an array of housing types.
Mhm.
So when you go in the community, it's not all, I think if you have all of one thing,
Yeah.
that's when it just becomes too much. It's just
I
I
becomes
think people
too big.
appreciate diversity too.
Mhm.
And then it gives you options.
Yeah.
You can have someone who, and then it not only that, it gives you differing price points.
Well, in different age groups, which I really think that's kind of what creates community, right?
Mhm.
I feel like that's with Seaside, that's what he did with
Yeah.
the urbanism,
Yeah.
and that's
That's-
kind of where
Yeah.
and it was
exactly.
very successful.
Yeah, super successful. It was
Mhm.
one of the first form-based codes.
And I think the other part of that is, and this is something we haven't really talked about, but there are a lot of people who enjoy the rural landscape aesthetic who don't want to have to maintain their own rural landscape aesthetic.
Mhm.
So that offers people who want to be a part of that, but either don't, They don't want to have to pay a landscaper to do that in their own yard, but can enjoy it as a part of the community. It gives variety for all the types of varying degrees of
And it's the same
desire.
thing with the trails. Like if you go to watercolor, when we worked on watercolor, we did some actual paved trails, right? So we try to encourage bicycles and walkers to go on the paved trails. But then there's some sidewalks that are just really small and dirt. They're just dirt sidewalks. You walk around and it's kind of, has a lot of tree-lined streets. It just has a lot of different types of amenities that are back there that people just really enjoy going into. Sometimes I just want to walk on a soft trail and kind of be there. Sometimes I want to be on an e-bike and just kind of zip through a hard trail and, get a little speed. So it's those kinds of things that we're looking at, not always paving sidewalks, trying to get different open spaces and to give people credit for those types of open spaces. So we create these really cool environments rather than just always the same suburban style house with a sidewalk up front and a 2-car garage.
So are you suggesting a city paid for trip for the board to go to 30A? Just kinda-
All in favor?
Love you to do that. Let's see if we can work that.
I'm pretty sure we
That would be really great. I'll give you that tour. I know it well, so.
Well, and I think and there are communities here that you can start to see that variety as well. And I think if you look at even recent neighborhoods like Trilith and then communities like Serenbe, those are actually pretty not far from one another. They're pretty different, but there's a lot about them that they're building off some of the same principles. And so to see that interpretation, and they have the natural trail, they have the more paved trail, they have all of these opportunities. And I think that how people are experiencing the open, what you can look at in everything we've talked about, the character defining elements are really how people experience the open space as much as it is the architecture.
If you look at the core of like Seaside, that's actually legally a road. The Arches Road where the amphitheater is, that's really a legal road. So the buildings in front of road, that's form-based code, right? We want that. But when you really think it's limited access, so everybody's walking it, it's just kind of one of those. And those are the kinds of open spaces I think I'd like to see giving credit for.
Yeah.
So even though it's a street, maybe you get dual use out of it, some limited access for deliveries and things. But on the same token, it's really a cool open space that I think people can really use. And I think we should give credit for those types of open spaces in the design guidelines. So we encourage more of that type of interrelationship between the building and the actual usable open space.
I agree.
And thanks everybody for
Yeah.
being here on
Hey, thanks.
election night. And nobody's been looking at their
Thanks for
phones, so
reminding
I'm really,
Yeah.
wow.
I'm just super excited it's going to be over.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah, me
next
too.
Couple days.
That'd be important. No more commercials.
No more.
I literally have had like 4 texts while we're sitting here
Yeah, just
telling me I need to get out and vote.
Vote.
So
Well, thank you. And if there are any other questions or comments along the way, I'd love to hear it. We do have just one note. They closed the survey that asked a lot of these same questions that we had at the open house. We closed it a week ago, Monday. And so we're tallying those and adding that aggregate it into this data as well.
We had 270 respondents.
yeah, it seems like we've got pretty good participation
We have
from.
great, but
That's great.
the word's getting out there. And once I was telling Allison, once we do the design manual, we really want to make sure that we do another huge push to the community to show them what's in the design manual, show them the ideas that they told us they liked and how we're implementing those, and to reach out to the development community and say, which I'm making meetings with, to say, hey, this is what we've heard. This is what people are looking for. What is it going to take for you to do it? Because we're going to mandate that you do it. We just want to make sure that it's something that's successful.
I like how you're creating that kind of vibe and feel and excitement about it, right? And I think
Yeah.
that'll go a long way once it actually gets started.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I will tell you guys, we have a tremendous, I'm going to say it's a momentum.
Yeah.
All these private developers are coming in saying, Bob, I wasn't sure if economic, from an economic standpoint, if this is the right time, because interest rates were high and everybody, but I think everybody's projecting that the economy is improving, the interest rates are dropping, and they're all kind of gravitating to saying, okay, we want to jump in early because it takes us 2-3 years before we actually can get something like this built. And we're projecting in the next 2 years, the economy will really do much better and rebound from where it was. So they're all coming in.
Mhm.
There's a lot of interest, which is nice.
Yeah, just take a look at land prices in Milton right now.
I guess,
Thank
Thank
It's
y'all
interesting
very
about
much.
thinking
Yeah,
have
thank you.
the connectivity first and then you start building
Mhm.
the I never really thought about it that way, but that makes sense. I like
Yeah,
that.
that's why we're looking at this kind of a trail loop. We're
Yeah.
doing a passive side and an active side, and what other loops have done where they've fallen short is like even the Alpha Loop, they've built it and there's segments that are unfinished. So it kind of like when I walked the Alpha Loop the other day, to experience it, I go, look, there's spots that are unfinished. And we talked about it. We said, look, the city should make sure that we can get this passive loop and an active loop, which we're starting to lay out now. I don't want to give it to you tonight, but we are laying it out. And Gray, who's the landscape architect, is doing a phenomenal job. So if we can get those two loops actually constructed, right, then all the developments just take like an offshoot from the loop. So that this way they want to join into the loop because the loop is the loop, but we've completed the loop. And I think that's going to be a big notable success story in Deerfield. From a
I agree.
connectivity standpoint, we're going to boast that we now have this loop where people who live there can jog and run around.
Yeah.
Something's passive, quiet. It's actually in green space, no cars. Other areas will be more active. So it's for everybody. And I think that's really going to be a great selling point for reactivating Deerfield.
It's cool.
Mhm.
Now we just have to come up with a great name for it. So
That's
if you
right.
think about a name, let me know. I'm
All right.
open.
Trail.
I'm open.
Hashtag.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank
Thank
you.
y'all for everything y'all are doing too, so. Okay. All right, so next on news business, we'll do 8B, review draft of the 2025 DRB meeting calendar.
Great.
Anybody have any issues with any of the dates or?
It's
April 1st is my
Yeah.
spring break, but that's.
Spring break.
And that's what I was just about to, is it really though?
Well, it's.
Well,
for
the-
KRs.
Oh, for
Yeah.
KR it is. Okay. Well,
But I think, so Fulton County is the following week, right?
No, it's the first.
usually
week
Fulton County is the
before.
first full week.
Yeah.
No,
of-
it's the last full week of March this year.
Oh, wow.
Next year.
Really?
That's early.
Mhm.
Wait, hold up, what?
Or are we
For Fulton?
backwards?
I
I
think
believe you guys are
Fulton-
the last week of March. We're the first week of April.
So when drafting this, I did look at the Fulton County school calendar and I made sure that none of these dates fell on any days
Okay,
that the students.
yeah, I better
were-
find out because my
So-
wife's wanting me to book something.
Yeah, we're the 7th through the 11th, so we're the second.
Okay,
the-
so
we're
second
the week
week,
after.
got it.
only affects those that are going on vacation.
Yes.
I'm gonna have you, I'll have you talk to my wife.
I hope my wife's not watching this.
Those of us that work for Fulton County and our kids go to private school, so that really messes us up.
And there's three. You're going somewhere, David.
Yep.
I'm talking to Stacy.
Oh, for that first week?
This is draft, so we can.
Yeah,
vote
I
on
say
it.
we do
Next
it and then,
You may still have.
yeah, if we need to
You
move
guys
that.
can email me any issues that you have with the draft calendar and we can work the dates.
Okay.
Okay,
That's the only one I see is,
Yeah. So
okay.
if there's three of us that can't be here.
We can work in a few Fridays if you'd like.
Yeah.
course.
Ah,
Yeah. Okay. So then I guess we need to make a motion on this. Okay. So I'll make a motion to approve the 2025 DRB meeting schedule.
I'll second.
All right. So we've got a motion from Mr. Warlick, a second from Mr. Jackson. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right, great. No old business. So I would like to make a motion for adjournment.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.